Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for having invited me and to give me a second chance to come back to Sydney, which was great the first time, and I really am happy to be able to do it a second time. My talk is on a film, actually a documentary film, which is called The Act of Killing, which was made by Joshua Oppenheimer. It just came out about 2 years ago, I believe, 2013. And I will not talk very much about mimetic theory or use it so much to analyze it, as I will use the film to raise questions about mimetic theory. I will not raise them, but those who know mimetic theory will see these questions arise. Okay? So, The Act of Killing is a very disturbing and extraordinary movie. It is a documentary about the massive political violence that took place in Indonesia between the end of September 1965 and February 1966, orchestrated by the army and General Suharto, who soon afterward would become the head of state. He remained in power for 35 years until 1998. The violence left an estimated 1 million persons dead, and about 800 political prisoners were tortured and imprisoned without trial. The movie, however, is a strange documentary which focuses exclusively on the perpetrators and not their victims, not on the survivors or their family, friends and relatives, or all others who, to a lesser degree, were also victims of the violence. The film does not ask for the point of view of the victim. It does not inquire into their experience, their trauma, their fear, and how they have lived since these tragic incidents happened. Yet, as I will argue later on, the point of view of the victim, of which the film just about never speaks, is in fact quite present. Perhaps even more present, in a sense, than if it were at the center of the film. And as if the victim's plight were made more visible by the very absence as an explicit object of discussion and inquiry. The main perpetrator on who the film focuses, his name is Anwar Congo, and his associates are thought to have slaughtered 10,500 presumed communists in more or less 5 months. That makes 70 persons a day if you calculate. I did that for, well, out of interest. The murderers are not asked to tell us why they did what they did, or to explain what motivated them to become mass murderers. Nor are they asked to tell us how they feel today about the massive murders they committed 50 years ago. Rather, Oppenheimer offered them the possibility to reenact their actions at the time. Murders, torture, interrogation, execution, burning of villages, etc. as a movie, of whichever style they wished. More precisely, as different scenes in which they play the leading role, either as themselves, murderers, or as victims, or as fictional characters. Fictional in the sense that these characters do not represent victims or perpetrators, but are imaginary figures which these improvised director added to the reconstruction of this very real human tragedy in order to make it, according to them, a better movie. Further, Oppenheimer filmed them while they visioned the result of their cinematographic efforts and while they discussed among themselves and criticized the quality of their production and acting. The documentary contains then scenes, the scenes they choose to reenact, the way they imagine them, and the making of the movie, as well as their meeting with various political figures and participation in public events. The end result is fascinating. It is, because it is so weird. This way of making the documentary required on the part of the murderer something very important, without which it would have been impossible. Something for us is most highly surprising, and that may be what suggested to Oppenheimer this very original approach, that the killer were willing, indeed they were eager to report what they did. Willing to stage and to represent their crimes, desiring their action to be seen by all in a movie they imagined, and in which they acted their own parts or that of the victims. Even more surprising, perhaps, is that they thought it appropriate to embellish this record of horror with fantasy. In some of the scenes, they dressed like American gangsters of the 1920s, or like cowboys when they interrogate or torture and kill. They also invented outdoor scenes in which young women sing and dance in a peaceful manner, which aims at giving the movie a particular aesthetic and spiritual dimension from their point of view. Now, this embellishment, however, does not aim at falsifying the truth. Not only do they reenact their past murders, they were also willing to have their musing and discussion about their work filmed and recorded, willing to tell us about some of the various illegal activities in which they engage in the past, or wish to engage in the future, proud to display their friendship with major political figures, and to invite the viewers of the film and the film crew to mass rallies or television shows where they were celebrated like heroes rather than murderers, and praised for the role they played in the assassination of thousands of Indonesian citizens. Clearly, they had nothing to hide and were not trying to hide anything. If they feel they have nothing to hide, it certainly is in part because the celebration of this genocidal violence as the founding moment of new Indonesia is the official line. It is not only the commonly received interpretation, but also the official version of history as it is taught in school, recounted on state television, recorded in books, and repeated again and again in political rallies. Anyone who challenges this view of the past is in danger, perhaps less today than he or she was when Suharto was still in power, when any attempt at revisionist history meant either death or indefinite imprisonment, but nonetheless in danger, exposed to all sort of hardship, to be socially excluded and marginalized, to receive frequent visits from the police, or more dangerous still, from a paramilitary group like Pancasila Youth, of which Anwar Congo is a major hero, a paramilitary force that was deeply involved in the 1965-66 killings. These killers then are encouraged by the powers that be, and perhaps also by the majority of the population, to take pride in what they did. This official interpretation of the 1965-66 killing is the basis of their fame, of their power, of their wealth. Why should we expect them to take any distance from it? In short, they imitate all those who endorse the official propaganda that promotes a fictive image of them as heroes and saviors of the nation, when in truth they were sadistic murderers who invented elaborate methods of killing and torturing. They present as glorious a violence about which there is nothing heroic, a violence that was radically asymmetric, and where the victims never presented any danger to their murderers. They are sustained in this representation of themselves as heroes by the public lie. They acquiesce to what is said by so many people, by the media, the government officials, but deep down inside, or so we are tempted to think, they know that it is not true. A hypothesis which seems confirmed by the fact that towards the end of the movie, Anwar begins to break down. He cries as he watches a scene in which he played a communist that is being killed, and during the filming of which he became extremely troubled. Finally, he becomes physically ill when he returns one last time to the place where they killed thousands of people, and he is asked to talk about it. His reaction, which he tries but fails to keep under control, shows that they have always known that this image of themselves was just a lie, and that their cinematographic reconstruction was only one more of the same. But is it really that simple? They know the truth, but they hide it to themselves and to others. Killers, their sponsors and acolytes, surround the truth with barriers of lies to ensnare others and to make it impossible for them to ever discover what really happened, or so we think. There certainly is some truth in this interpretation. lies do constitute obstacles that prevent agents from discovering what really took place. But in this case, that is not all. Something else is going on. Something that is closely related to a fundamental phenomena that Cesario Bandera analyzes in the first chapter of his recent book, A Refuge of Lies. What is involved here is not only lying, as we usually understand the term, falsifying the record, but also a different relationship to truth. Of course, lying itself constitutes a different relationship to truth than saying the truth. That is evident. However, what constitutes a lie varies depending on how one understands what the truth is and what type of relation the truth entertains with the world. It varies depending on what we see as being the truth. Simply saying that Anwar and others are lying, that they are trying to veil the truth or to embellish the horror of what happened, actually hides the complexity of what is going on here. At least that's my claim. So, second part is called, But That Is the Truth. From the beginning, it is clear that one of the objectives of the perpetrators in participating in this documentary is to tell the truth. Not so much to set the record straight, because they don't really feel that it has been falsified, but to show in details exactly what has happened so that people can really understand. Also because, so I quote from the film, but actually I watched the film a few times, but I didn't go back and check all my quotations. So they're kind of quoted from memory. So it's not necessarily the exact words, but it's pretty close. So, and because, as they say, this is us. This is the truth. It is our history. It is important for all to know. To some extent, they want to leave a record of what they did, so that others in the future can remember them. And remember what happened as it happened. They are not trying to hide anything, and they do not attempt to show themselves in any way better than they were. Nor do they undertake to falsely represent their victim as dangerous, fearsome enemies. But they truly show them as they were, helpless preys that they mercilessly destroyed. They feel no need to lie. They have no thought even of lying. There is, in that respect, a very interesting scene in which the issue of truth of what they are doing is explicitly discussed. Adi, another is his name, Adi. Adi, another of the main perpetrator, friend, and at least at the time of the event, close associate of Anwar, suddenly says, as they are beginning to film a scene in which a prisoner is interrogated, "You realize that if we succeed in doing this, and this film is a success," so this is Adi talking, "people will know the truth. The government has always been saying that the communists were cruel, but that is not true. The truth is that we are the ones who were cruel. If the people know that, everything changes." Somebody else intervenes. His name is Herman. "Herman, we'll meet again, Herman. But that is the truth." That's a remarkable statement. But that is the truth. Adi, "It is not good to say all truths. Not all truth should be said to everybody. Even God has his secrets." I love that sentence. "I'm not saying this to stop you. It's not a question of fear. It has been too long, and there can be no legal action against us. It is about the future. I'm not saying this, I am just saying this so you understand what you are doing." Adi in this scene illustrates what Cesario Bandera has in mind when he speaks of a different relationship to truth. One where truth is not seen as something that is good in itself, but as something that can be and that often is extremely dangerous. Therefore, we should be careful. Not all truths should be told to everybody, and some truths should never be told. Even God has his secrets. Nonetheless, Adi is not really pressing for them to abandon this scene. It will be filmed, and he will take part in it. Interestingly, soon after that scene is filmed, another character from their past, a journalist whom we've met before, comes in and says, remarkable, "I can't believe how smooth you guys were. We were working in the same office." So, in fact, the editor of the local newspaper was the coordinator of the anti-communist campaign in the region, and the killings and interrogation took place in the newspaper's building. So this guy says, we were working in the same office, and I'm a journalist with ears like an elephant, and I never noticed anything. I never knew what was going on. Adi, who was really shocked by this, says, you never knew anything? We were just beside you. You did not hear the people scream? You did not see all these people that came in walking and that were carried out? No, never. I swear to God, I did not know anything. So Adi again, look, I do not want to say you're lying, but we were right beside you, in the same building, on the other side of the wall, and you did not know anything? How is that possible? The whole town knew what was going on here. The journalist is certainly lying in the most ordinary sense of the term. This is not what Anwar and his friends are doing. At no point do they try to disavow their participation in the killing or cruelty. Once, while discussing with Anwar, Adi will even boast of how he killed the father of his Chinese girlfriend. In fact, to understand Adi's intervention, we need to take into account another film to which, in my view, their own attempt constitutes a response. There is an official propaganda film of the Indonesian government, which every school children in the country must watch. It recounts the events that led to the army coup and violence, the assassination of 6 army generals by, it was said, communist-affiliated soldiers, and depicts the communists as cruel and morally depraved. It contains some gory scenes, among which one where the daughter of one of the assassinated general soaks her hand in the blood of her slain father and smears it on her face while calling him Papa, Papa. Anwar, so this is it. Anwar, he's the guy who's killed like 70 person a day for 6 months, right? Anwar criticizes this movie from the Indonesian government, wondering what effects such scenes can have on young school children. He wants his film to be a different film that the whole family can enjoy. It's not this. Like Adi, he is quite aware that the government propaganda lies, and he wants his film to be more truthful. There's another scene that takes place before Adi's warning, where Anwar and him are fishing. So they're both on the side of this pond, they're fishing. And in which Adi tells to Anwar, look, if you killed my father, I'd be angry with you, right? That's normal. So the children of the communists, their parents were killed, their house were burned down, they could not go to school, they want revenge. That's normal. So I think the government should do something to recognize them. At first sight, this seems somewhat contradictory with his warning about revealing their own cruelty. On the one hand, Adi seems to be saying we should recognize the victim as victims. On the other hand, he is saying we should not reveal that we were the ones who were cruel. We should not reveal that they were victims. In fact, Adi is not incoherent at all, because he is not thinking in terms of victims. In both his discussion with Anwar and in his warning, he is motivated by the same purpose, the harmony of the community. Recognizing the suffering of the children of the communists, facilitating their integration into Indonesian society will enhance the harmony of the community. Reconciliation is a good thing. However, showing that we, the winners, rather than the communists we exterminated, were the cruel ones, can only create resentment and conflict. It cannot be good for the community. For Adi, it is not for Adi, truth is not only something that is dangerous, but there are other values that are more important than truth and that guide us in knowing which truth should be revealed or not. This is really what's going on. Well, the scene will be filmed. It is filmed. And it does exactly what Adi said it would do. That is, it reveals them as cruel. It reveals them as cruel and sadistic, but not for the reason he thought. Not because it shows them as they were in the past, but because this particular scene shows that the past still continues today, rather than it merely reenacts it. So, the person who plays the role of the prisoner who is being interrogated in the scene against which Adi warned the others, has been introduced earlier as one of Anwar's neighbors, someone who simply seems to be hanging out with him. We first see this neighbor at the very beginning of the movie when he accompanies Anwar to the top of the newspaper building where prisoners used to be killed. In that scene, Anwar and his neighbor, as has his neighbor sit down on the floor, puts a metal wire around his neck as if he were to strangle him, to proudly demonstrate the method that he, Anwar, invited to kill victims without spilling too much blood, which, as he says, smelled awful and was difficult to clean. Later in that scene, reminiscing the films that he used to watch at the cinema across the street before coming on to kill communist suspect, Anwar dances the cha-cha-cha. His neighbor, perhaps troubled by the inappropriateness of Anwar's behavior in this context, comments, "He's a happy man." At the end of the movie, Anwar will come back to this place where he used to kill and when he first danced the cha-cha-cha, but this time he will get sick and throw up, as he tells us, what he used to do there 50 years ago. Later on in the movie, but before the interrogation scene, we will learn that this neighbor is really a victim. At some point, while they are discussing about scenes to include in the movie, he offers his own story. At that time, in 1965, he was only a child, 11 years old, living in the house of his father-in-law. It's kind of a bit bizarre, but I don't know how to understand that. Who treated him like his own child. One night, people cried for the father to come out. His wife said, "Don't go, it is dangerous." He went nonetheless. They heard him cry for help, and the next morning they found him dead, his body stuck head down halfway into a barrel. With the wife of his father-in-law, they buried him. Families of the communists were expelled out of town to an area where there was nothing. He couldn't go to school. That is why he says he could never go to school and had to teach himself how to read and write. And then he says, "I'm not saying this to criticize, but maybe it would be important to introduce this scene in the movie." The reactions to his proposals are rather cool. Someone says, "If we were to put every scene in the movie, it would never end." Another objects that it's too complicated. Only Anwar suggests, "Well, we'll see if we can fit it in." So this real victim is the person who plays the role of the prisoner in the scene to which Adi objected before it was filmed, for fear that it would reveal them, rather than the communists, to be the cruel ones. As the interrogation scene unfolds, the interrogators, who the prisoner knows are real murderers, perhaps the person who killed his father-in-law is one of them, put a metal wire around his neck and starts saying things like, "Maybe we should kill him for real." Anwar intervenes at one point and says, "Give him some water." But he, the prisoner, the neighbor, believes the water to be poison and refuses to take any. They try to force him to drink. Progressively, he becomes more and more afraid and starts begging for his life. He knows who they are, and they know who he is, and he really fears them. Here the fiction collapses. For we are not only viewing a representation of what happened in the past, but we are also witnessing the continuation of the past in the present. Perhaps as a punishment and a warning for his unconscious suggestion. Perhaps simply because by revealing himself as a real victim, he called forth their violence by pointing out that he was the type of person to which such things could be done. In any case, the very real psychological torture to which they subject Anwar's neighbor reveals the truth of what they are doing and of what they were doing in a way that no mere representation of the past could have done. Actually, we never seen a neighbor in the movie after that. I think he thought, "I don't like doing this." Blindness and truth to the next section. One of the most striking aspects of this film is the blindness of Anwar and his fellow murderers and actors in the movie, including Adi, in spite of his warning. What they fail to see, what they are blind to, is the image of themselves which they give in the movie. This is particularly clear in the case of Herman. Herman is a friend of Anwar, an aspiring politician and a somewhat important member of the Pancasila youth paramilitary organization. Herman is too young to have participated in the violence, but he is quite eager to take part in a movie in which he plays so many different roles. Herman is rather fat, but in no way self-conscious. He is happy to be cast in any role, as a mother who pleads for the life of his children, a doll that Anwar tortures, simultaneously blaming the mother for the death of her child, that he is killing, as a murderer in the scene where he strangles Anwar, and in another one where he also kills him, eats his liver, and tries to force his genitals down his throat. Can't believe this stuff. As some strange fictional woman character who is sitting while young women come out dancing from the mouth of a building which has the form of a fish, as a brutal attacker when they reenact the burning of the village, and so on. In all his roles, Herman puts a lot of energy and effort trying to be a good actor, of being convincing, whether he is a mother pleading for the life of her child, or a brutal interrogator. He's not very good at it, but he is in some sense very professional. Whatever the role, he does his best. Being in this movie is much more important for him than being either a hero or a victim, and he will do all that he can for the film to be a success. He is absolutely convinced that the movie's message is perfectly clear and transparent and true, and that is why when Adi objects, if we succeed, this will show that we were cruel, not the communists, he responds, but that is true. He clearly believes in the truth of what they are doing. Similarly, Anwar and Adi are happy to be cast as cowboys or as victims, with scarred and bruised face, prisoners who have been recently beaten and tortured. Maybe they think that by acting in a film, what they did 50 years ago, they will come to believe that it was all just a movie, like the ones they watched back then, before going to interrogate and kill prisoners. Yet they want this movie to conform to the reality of what happened. They watch again the scenes they have filmed and criticize them if they are not sufficiently representative of how it was then. For example, when Anwar visions the first scene on top of the building where he demonstrated how he invented the metal wire to strangle the victims so as to avoid too much blood, to clean, and dances, he comments, "That's not good. I should not be dressed like that. I should be wearing black. I always used to wear black. I should dye my hair," which he will do. "I look as if I was going to a picnic." When the scene was shot, Anwar was wearing white shoes, white pants, and a green shirt with flowers on it. So he finds that really inappropriate in the film. Right? In their case, the case of Anwar and Adi, their willingness to play the role of the victim is a bit surprising. Unlike Herman, they were actors in this tragedy. They killed thousands of people, and they are acclaimed as heroes for their role as perpetrators. Why are the torturers and executioners so eager, so ready to cast themselves as their own victims? Anwar in particular plays the role of the victim many times, and there are 2 or 3 scenes where he is killed. One possible answer is because it was all a lot of fun. By replaying the past as a movie, they are playing at it again, and they enjoy it. It was all a great game, and they had a wonderful time. What they want to show is how great and powerful they were. For this to be seen and recognized by everybody, the victims must be convincing. They must be pitiful, broken, and bleeding. For this is precisely what makes their murderers great. There is nothing to hide. Why should anyone take the side of the victims? These helpless creatures condemned to die into social oblivion? Who would do that? The victims are necessary to show the extent of their violence, in which they pride themselves. Hiding the victims would be disastrous. This is what they're blind to. They cannot imagine that anyone will see what they have done otherwise than they see it. Then than as a proof of their superior power, of their violence, which all will admire and fear. Even if Adi wonders if it is wise for them to show that they were the ones who were cruel rather than the cruel, he clearly shares the same image of himself as famous and important because of his violence. He did not speak out of consideration for the victim, but in consideration of the future, of what others might do, not of the past, of what they had done to others. Herman, who was too young to take part in the killings, can, through the movie, vicariously take part in their greatness. One of the scenes of the movie is filmed outdoor. This is one of the most incredible scenes, actually, the second version. We are in the countryside. There is a beautiful waterfall, and we see young women dancing and singing. This is one of the opening scenes of the movie. We hear a voice. It seems to be either that of Herman or that of Angar, which says, "Smile, look happy, happier, this is real joy." Then someone says, "Cut," and members of the crew bring blankets to the young woman who were cold from dancing close to the waterfall, and this could have been filmed high in the mountains. One of the last scenes of the film is nearly identical, without the off voice. We see the woman with waterfall, the woman dancing and so on, but this time we see Anwar wearing a black robe as a priest of some strange religion, with his arms spread off as if he were praying, looking at the waterfall. Beside him are two characters dressed normally. Anwar turns towards them, he lowers his head, and one of the personages hangs around the neck of Anwar a large medal, shakes the Anwar's hand and says, "Thank you for killing me and sending me to heaven." They have nothing to hide. One of the most fascinating aspects of the act of killing is the complete inability of the actors, killers, to imagine the reaction of others that others will have when they will see this and other scene. Anwar, when he visions that scene, because we see that afterwards, he sees it, right? Where he receives the thank and decoration from his very victim, says, "What I like about this is that the waterfall is so beautiful and looks so pure and peaceful." He is happy with his scene, happy that it turned out as he imagined. He has succeeded in showing himself, showing something that is important to him. The probable meaning of the scene is that now that all this killing and violence is over, we live in a pure and peaceful Indonesia where all are reconciled. Even those we killed are thankful for what has been done to them. Anwar is not naive, and he's not lying to himself. There are other scenes where the ghosts of those he killed torment him at night and prevent him from sleeping. He knows that not all the dead, at least not all his dead, are peaceful. This scene, in his mind, nonetheless constitute the best ending for the film, the way it should be. The historical scenes all aim to be accurate in their representation of what happened. But here, we are not in the historical past. We are in the symbolic atemporal domain where we discover the meaning of what happened. How can they be so blind? They see the same things, events, murders, cruelty that we see, but they see something completely different. Silence, the last part. The film is characterized by the paucity of explanation it provides for what happened and why it happened. Oppenheimer does not really tell us anything, and neither do the murderers, politicians or officials of the Pancasila Youth Parliamentary Organization. At one point, Anwar recognized that what they were doing was wrong, but he had to do it. Why did he have to do it? He doesn't tell us anymore. We're simply repeatedly told that they, the victims, were communists. More precisely, their world seems to be divided between communists, which in their language means is equivalent to their prisoners and victims, and themselves, as well as all others who approve of what they did. This is seen as a sufficient explanation of the violence that took place, as if it went without saying that communists had to be exterminated. We are, however, told an interesting story about how these small-times gangsters, because that's what Anwar and his friends were, Preman as they are known in Indonesia, a word which is supposed to be derived from the English freemen, came to be involved in the anti-communist campaign. Among the various illegal activities in which he engaged at the time, one was racketing of illegal tickets, cinema or movie tickets, which they sold outside the cinema across the street from the newspaper building where much of the killing took place. The communists wanted to ban the screening of American movies, which they liked, Anwar and his friends, and which attracted many customers. The communists were threatening to take away their source of income. End of the story. The communists were seen as potential obstacle to their continued business activity. This is presented to us as what was wrong with the communists and the rationale for their opposition to them. One wonders, however, if by the same occasion, and this is what I want to raise, all their business competitors did not become communists. Leslie Dwyer and Begun Santikarma, in their study of the violence that took place in Bali, Indonesia, in 1965-66, claim the following. It cannot, we argue, be easily, that the violence cannot, we argue, be easily understood as the hostilities between clearly defined groups of people. Much of the bloodshed, in fact, we have found, was motivated by social conflicts that were local, diverse, and shifting, conflicts that cross-cut and shaped political alliances, and that were then manipulated by the state to give particular form to the violence. These conflicts erupted over issues of caste, over access to and ownership of land, over economic equalities, over status and inheritance within extended families. The violence also worked to exploit and intensify inequalities between classes, between genders, underscoring the marginality of women and the poor. They, that is, Dwyer and Santikarma, preface the claim above on the violence that took place in Bali by saying, in contrast to many events of mass violence elsewhere in the world. As I have argued in The Barren Sacrifice, many authors show that the interbreeding of political violence with social violence, with domestic conflicts and personal rivalries, is everywhere the rule rather than the exception. Robert Galatelli on political denunciation in Nazi Germany, Fitzpatrick and Galatelli on political denunciation since the French Revolution, Hinton on Cambodia, Massaoui on recent political violence in Algeria, Kalivas on massacres during the Greek Civil War. All these authors show that in all these cases, individuals exploit the political violence to their own advantage. To pursue personal conflicts, they use political violence to settle old scores, to obtain revenge against successful rivals, to avoid lengthy and expensive divorce procedures, to eliminate business rival, and so on. This is what the perpetrators of the film never talk about, apart from the passing suggestion that they were defending their business interests. It seems to us that the violence was too massive, extensive, and extraordinary to be explained by such petty, everyday causes, personal conflicts, and professional rivalries. Yet, what Dwyer and Santikarma describe looks a lot more like what Girard calls a sacrificial crisis than a civil war in which well-defined political opponents fought each other. What the film never talks about or attempts to deconstruct is what I call the myth of political violence. That there is something like political violence that is different from other forms of violence. Anwar and his acolyte appear to us as extremely strange and incomprehensible because they are such normal and ordinary people. There is a scene in which we see Anwar with his grandchildren in a farmyard after they have broken the leg of a duck. Here we meet a kind grandpa teaching his grandson not to hurt animals. This is the same person who's killed thousands, right? Is this the same person who killed thousands of presumed communists? Our incomprehension comes from the fact that we fail to see that the violence was much more indiscriminate than the word the communist suggests. That many individuals were happy to take advantage of the professional services of people like Anwar as the newspaper editor, who was in charge of the local association and whose newspaper housed the killing, newspaper building housed the killing and torture session, visibly, when he answers to Oppenheimer, visibly jealous and resentful of the attention given to Anwar, he says, "I am too important a person to kill people with my own hands. I don't need to do such thing. There's people like Anwar to do that, to do things like that. Why focus on him? There were tons like him, precisely. There were tons of people who were engaged in the killing and whose reasons and motivation, like Anwar's, were diverse and unclear. What happened seems closer, as I said, to a sacrificial crisis and what we commonly think as political violence, a crisis whose events were then covered by the grand narrative of the fight against communism and the birth of new Indonesia, a narrative in which Anwar and his associates seek and find their justification." Thank you.